All right, let's talk about one of the most rewarding things you can possibly bake, a perfect loaf of sourdough bread. You know what I'm talking about. That incredible crackling crust, that soft, tangy crumb. It feels like pure magic. But here's the secret. It's not magic. It's just a process. And today, we're going to break that process down step by step.
Because when you get right down to it, that's all this is. It's just flour, water, and salt, completely transformed by time and, yeah, a little bit of living magic. And that magic all starts with our very first topic, the starter.
Right, so before we even dream of mixing dough, we have to get to know the heart and soul of this whole operation, the sourdough starter. And you've got to remember, this isn't just an ingredient like a bag of flour. It's a living, breathing colony of wild yeast and bacteria. I like to think of it as your new baking partner. You got to take care of it so it can do its job.
Now, how you care for this little partner really just depends on your own schedule. If you're baking all the time, you'll want to go with counter mode. You just leave it out and give it a little food, flour and water every day. But if you're more of a weekend warrior, fridge mode is an absolute lifesaver. You just feed it once a week, let it wake up for a couple of hours, and then it goes right back to sleep in the cold. Super easy.
Okay, so here's the whole journey laid out from start to finish. And yep, you're seeing that right, it says 36 hours. But before you get totally intimidated, just take a closer look. Most of that time is just you waiting around. This timeline is our roadmap, and it's going to take us from feeding our starter on day 1 all the way to pulling a gorgeous loaf out of the oven on day 2.
So let's get into our first active step, waking up the levain. Now, levain is just a fancy word for the specific bit of starter we're going to use in our dough. Think of this as giving it a supercharged breakfast to get it ready for the main event. You have to do this because using a sleepy, cold starter straight out of the fridge, it just isn't going to have the power to lift your dough.
So around 8 a.m. on bake day, you'll take a tiny bit of your starter and give it a big feeding of flour and warm water. Then you just let it do its thing for the next few hours. What you're looking for is a huge transformation. It should literally triple in size and get this beautiful bubbly dome on top. That dome, that's the signal. That tells you the yeast is at its absolute peak and it is ready to make some bread.
Our levain is active, it's bubbly, it's ready to go. So now it's time to actually build the dough. And this is where we get our hands in there and really develop that gluten structure. That structure is what's going to give our bread that amazing chewy texture and that incredible rise in the oven, what bakers call oven spring.
But first, a quick vocabulary lesson. The word is Autolyse. It sounds super scientific, but all it means is letting your flour and water hang out together for a little while before you add the salt. And let me tell you, this little step is a total game changer. It lets the flour get fully hydrated, which makes the dough so much smoother and easier to work with later on.
So at 1 o'clock, we'll mix our bubbly starter with water, then stir in our flour just until there are no dry bits left. That's it. We cover it up and walk away for 30 minutes. That's our Autolyse. You see, salt actually tightens gluten, so by waiting to add it, we give the flour a head start. After the rest, we sprinkle the salt and a little extra water on top and just squeeze it all in until it's combined.
Now, it's time to build strength. And we do that with a series of stretch and folds. Over the next hour and a half, you're going to do 4 sets of these, with a 30-minute rest in between each one. This is such a gentle way to develop gluten. You'll literally feel the dough transform under your hands, from a sticky mess into a smooth, strong, elastic ball.
And this really captures the whole spirit of making sourdough. We're not pummeling the dough by kneading it. Nope, we're gently encouraging it, folding it over on itself to create layers and build that internal structure. It's a much more elegant way to develop gluten, and honestly, it's way less work.
Okay, once those folds are all done, we enter what might be the most critical waiting period of all, bulk fermentation. This is when we just let the dough rest and let the yeast do all the work. It's busy eating the sugars in the flour, producing the gas that makes bread rise, and creating all those complex acids that give sourdough its classic tangy flavor. This is where the magic happens.
So how do you know when this super important stage is finished? Well, you have to ditch the clock and learn to read the dough. You're looking for it to grow by about 50 to 75%. It'll look airy, you'll see some bubbles on the surface, but my absolute favorite sign is the last one here. Give the bowl a little shake. If that whole blob of dough jiggles like Jell-O, that's the sweet spot. You've totally nailed it.
We are officially on the home stretch of day 1. Our dough is perfectly fermented, it's alive, it's full of flavor. Now it's time for the final shape. The whole point of this step is to create a tight skin, or surface tension, on the dough. That tension is what helps the loaf spring up tall in the oven instead of just spreading out like a pancake.
This is a 2-part process. First,
We do a gentle pre-shape, just making a loose ball. Let that rest for about 20 minutes so the gluten can relax. Then, it's time for the final shape. You'll flip it over and fold it up tightly on itself, kind of like a burrito, to make that surface nice and taut. Then, you pop it into a proofing basket with the seam facing up.
And now for the easiest, and you could argue, one of the most important parts of the whole process, the long, cold rest in the fridge. This step is just brilliant. It does two amazing things at once. First, the cold slows down the yeast, which gives the bacteria more time to develop that deep, complex, classic sour flavor we all love. And second, it firms up the dough, which makes it an absolute breeze to handle and score the next day.
It is morning on day 2. All of that work, all of that patience, it is all about to pay off in a big, big way. It is time for the grand finale, the bake. This is where we transform that cold blob of dough into a magnificent, crackling loaf of bread.
The absolute #1 key to a fantastic sourdough bake is intense blasting heat. So we need to preheat our oven, with a Dutch oven inside it, to a blazing 500 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 260 Celsius.
And listen, do not rush this part. I'm serious. You need to let that pot preheat for at least 1 full hour. You want that Dutch oven to be so completely saturated with heat that when your cold dough hits it, you get an instant explosive burst of steam. That's what gives you that incredible oven spring.
Okay, here's the final game plan. First, you'll take your chilled dough and give it a confident slash on top with a razor blade. This tells the bread where to expand. Then it goes into that screaming hot Dutch oven. The first 20 minutes are baked with the lid on. This traps all the steam from the dough, creating a perfect environment for a huge rise. Then, you take the lid off for the last 20 to 25 minutes to get that deep, golden, crunchy crust.
And when you're baking, don't be timid about the color. You want a dark crust. All that color is flavor. We're not aiming for a pale, blonde loaf here. You want to push it until it's a really deep golden brown, maybe even the color of a dark chestnut. That's the sign of a fully baked loaf with a ton of flavor.
Your house smells absolutely incredible. The bread is out of the oven, it's making these little crackling sounds, and now you have to face the single hardest step of this entire process. You have to wait. You must let it cool for at least an hour before you slice into it. If you cut it while it's still hot, the steam inside will make the crumb gummy and sticky. Trust me on this one, the wait is absolutely worth it.
And there you have it, the complete roadmap to baking incredible homemade sourdough bread. It's a journey, for sure. It's all about patience and observation, but the reward is unlike anything you can possibly buy at a store. So now that you have the plan, the real question is, what will you create? Happy baking!